The mosque is a very emotional issue, but it is a core principle in this country. If people own private property and they want to build a mosque or a synagogue or a shul or a yeshiva or a church, it's not up to the government to tell them they can or cannot do it. We cannot go with a principle where the government says you may not build a yeshiva there or a shul there or a mosque there. Public is a different thing, but the government cannot do that. I passed a bill in 2000, the Religious Liberty and the Religious Land Use and Institutions Protection Act, or LUPA as we finally call it. Charles Kennedy, a former Republican congressman from Florida, and I wrote this bill, which is designed to prevent public agencies from interfering with religious practice in various ways. The way it comes up most often is with the Orthodox community, by the way, when they want to build a yeshiva or something in Great Neck or in Elmont, and people don't want it there for some reason, and they oppose it, and they try to do zoning or whatever, they use our LUPA to change that. I mean, to challenge that, to support religious freedom. The mosque is private. It's not just a mosque, by the way. It's a community center with a mosque in it. Anyway, for shorthand, the mosque. Right. The mosque is a private operation. As long as it's within the zoning, the government has no power.
Can they check when funding is coming for that mosque?
Yes and no. People can inquire. My suspicion is they don't know yet. My suspicion is they're hoping to raise their own private money. They're thinking maybe they'll get foreign money. I don't know that they know where the money's coming from yet. I mean, we're all familiar with people with grand schemes who don't have the money yet, but are hoping the money will arrive like manna from heaven. But there's a problem with that too. The government cannot inquire beyond normal inquiry procedures. We can't persecute, in effect, a church or a shul that we don't like for other reasons by saying, where's your money coming from? Unless there's some reason to believe. I mean, we have laws. We have laws about the importation of money, about money laundering, all of this stuff. If there's any reason to believe that any law is being violated, then the government can inquire. But if the money is perfectly kosher, so they can inquire. We don't want to give, the problem is you don't want to give the government that kind of power. Because you give the government power to inquire on that, you don't know who's going to use it how it's going to be used 5 years from now or next year. And the Jewish community in this country has been very, very strong for a century almost, on these questions, not simply because we're wonderful people who have great thoughts of religious freedom in our head, but also because we're a minority, a small minority. And you never know when government power will be used against the minority. That's why we have always supported expansive notions of religious freedom, and we cannot change that now, as unpleasant as it may be to think about it.
And I will just add, in my mind, in my head, I agree with what Jerry said.
In your heart?
In my heart, I'm very troubled by it because of what happened there, and it just seems to me that the sponsors of the mosque should have more sensitivity and should look at this and say, you know, because the people who raise concerns to me that really trouble me and trouble my heart are those who lost loved ones, and they're troubled by it, that this is, you know, whether they're right or wrong, it's something that is very troubling. And I think that if I were a leader of that community, I would say, you know, this isn't the best place to do this. Yes, there's religious freedom, and all those principles are true, and Jerry's right, you don't want to turn back on any other religion, but given the time, given the situation, we have a very similar situation in Staten Island where there's a smaller group that wants to have a mosque, and there it was also, it was a very bad location from a zoning point of view and from quality of life point of view, so it was easier to take the position. But here, this one, his, you know, in my mind, I know he's right, but in my heart, I'm very troubled by it.
Is that in your district?
My district.
Go ahead.
Let me say one other thing, by the way. The people who really bother me on this, I have full sympathy for relatives, and they're relatives of people who lost loved ones in 9/11 on both sides of this issue, by the way. we're hearing from the people like Sally Reaganhart and company, but there is a committee group on the other side. I have very strong emotional understanding of people who don't want to see it there and so forth. The people, and I understand it on both sides, the people who really bother me, the one group of people who really bother me in this whole thing, are the people who will come out and say it's terrible, et cetera, and, you know, the emotions and all that, but won't support health care for the victims of 9/11, as we just had in Congress. People who are perfectly happy to orate on these topics, but won't help the victims.
Yeah,